Well, joining us now on Manx.news is Richard Hubbard from Crogga Energy. Now, many people in the Isle of Man will have heard of Crogga Energy, but first of all, we'll get a synopsis about the company. Good morning, Richard.
Yes, good morning, John.
And first of all, for those who are not familiar with Crogga Energy, could you give us a brief outline about the company, please?
Yes, most certainly. It was incorporated back in 2018 by a Manx management team led by Dickon Sargent and John Cottier, and it was incorporated for the purpose of appraising and then hopefully developing the Isle of Man's only known gas field. But it has, at the same time, always had the ambition to become the island's transition energy company, taking on both natural gas and the renewables.
The information you've released this morning, Monday morning, is that you have been granted a permit with the UK organisation that governs all of these sort of projects. Just before we talk about that, if you could just explain a little bit about the where you're up to with the Mackled project, which is in Isle of Man waters, and then we'll talk about
Yes,
what you've released this morning.
but okay. So the Isle of Man's gas field is really needing a name. So at the moment, we simply refer to it as the Crogga gas field. But hopefully, with time, we can come up with something better than that. It was actually discovered 40 years ago by BP in 1982, and BP held on to it through its transition to become Manx territorial waters, but relinquished it in the mid-90s. And since that time, it's been under the control of the Department of Infrastructure. And in 2018, it was applied for and awarded to Crogga. Crogga Limited is the name of the company that holds the asset.
So why
Uh,
hasn't this gas field been exploited up to now?
yes, of course, it's a good question. So the interesting part of the story is that I'm a former BP guy, and it was actually me as responsible manager for BP relinquishing that and returning it to the Isle of Man government in the 90s. So I do actually know quite a lot about it from old days. And it isn't because there's no gas there. There's most definitely gas. But the reservoir is a little bit difficult, and no one's ever quite sure if that gas will flow to surface at rates that make it worthwhile to embark on a commercial development. So at the time in the 90s, BP did not walk away because there was no gas. It was simply that on a strategic level, they exited, is the word that we used, the entire East Irish Sea. So they didn't really want to be left with a single asset in what we refer to as a basin that otherwise had no BP involvement. So that's the story. There is a gas field, but we don't know if it will flow at a commercial rate. Now, had BP continued in the 1990s, they would have drilled a Manx well under Manx jurisdiction, and that's what I would like to do now. So all I'm really doing is going back to the playbook that BP wrote, and we refer to this well as independence, and that's what we would like to drill. Now, there is a sort of a slight unusual characteristic. Back in 2018, when the production license was issued to Crogga, it was indeed issued as a full production license, but it did not have drilling regulations. So it wasn't possible to utilize a rig and or drill and or produce hydrocarbons. So it's a bit like owning the Manxman ferry, but without having marine regulations, you can't sail it to Heysham or Liverpool. So that's the situation that Crogga has been in since it was awarded the license in 2018. So we did try to drill this well back in 2023, but it simply wasn't possible on a practical level because there are no drilling regulations. So we are waiting for the Isle of Man government to enact the necessary regs.
Okay, I mean that's quite an interesting point because obviously there's a well-known gas field that many people will have sailed past many times on the ferry just outside our territorial waters as you head on the ferry to Heysham. What are the main
Yeah.
differences then that are holding up? Obviously, the Isle of Man, separate jurisdiction from the UK. So obviously, this is putting a lot of extra barriers in the place. Surely some of these things must have been resolved when BP were doing their work back in the 80s and 90s.
Indeed, yes. I mean, I am delving into history, but if you can bear with me, the Isle of Man government held its first, what is known as license round in 1995, and at least three companies took areas. There may be more, but I'm unaware of those. There was the American company Marathon, the French company Elf, and the British company BP. And at that time, they were all those blocks were awarded with drilling rigs. And both Marathon and Elf drilled a well. They didn't find anything, but they drilled a well, a Manx well in Manx territorial waters. And had BP drilled at that time, they too would have drilled using those rigs. But regulations move on, they're out of date, and they need updating and refreshing, and that's what's never happened.
Okay, so fast forward to now and the current project you're wanting to, or you have been carrying out over the last few years. It seems that this project seems to be moving at a very, very slow pace.
Yeah.
What's the reason for this? Is this
Um,
due
I,
to
I
lack of regulations in the Isle of Man, or
Well, I mean, that's a practical matter that can be overcome. Joe and I wish I could give you a good reason for that. So when I arrived, okay, I've been in post for 2 years, so I'm the new boy on the block. Crogga has 74 very enthusiastic shareholders, and they all said to me, the reason we're doing this is because it could be a very valuable asset for the island. And as such, it's a bit of a game changer and could transform the economy. So the gas is far more than the island itself would ever need. It's sort of an export opportunity to sell gas to all sorts of places, mostly the UK, of course, because of its proximity, but in principle, it could go anywhere. So the shareholders are very, very well aware that this is a valuable asset. And you may know that a month ago, we put out a press release in response to a Tynwald question from one of the MHKs. And it's a scoping case, that's the word we use. So until we drill the first well, we don't know. So I make that very, very clear. But based on the scoping case, and if the well shows it to be commercial, this thing could be worth over £5 billion in what we call production revenues, sales of gas. And more than half of that, 2.8 billion, would go to the Treasury. So our way of looking at it is we're not sure there is any more valuable asset that the Isle of Man owns than this one. So it is perplexing as to why there is so much uncertainty. The Chief Minister has always been very supportive, and he's told me that since the day I arrived. And we're hoping that in the current situation, there is now enough sort of momentum to see the government decide to enact drilling regulations. And we'd like to drill the well soon after we've drilled the well that we'll go on to speak about in UK waters. It's too good an opportunity to leave it out there.
Now, this is obviously drilling for gas and oil and other such. The hydrocarbon world is a very specialist industry. Does the Isle of Man have the expertise to control and regulate this industry?
Well, of course, I'm sure none of them would mind me saying, of course they don't. Why would they? But you may equally be aware that this is my wife has a mother from Laxey who's unfortunately passed on now, but that's my link with the Isle of Man. And her cousin works in the pharmacy industry, and he's told me that he's seen 2 or 3 times that when the Isle of Man doesn't have specialist regulations, it uses what is known as a legal extension to bring those across from the UK and make them Manx law. And that's all that was done with the drilling regs in 1995, and all that actually needs to be done now, today. So,
and if simply all they need to do is extend UK regulations, why do you think it's taking so long? for them to do this. The Manx
if you
Utilities
get the
Authority
answer,
obviously are
let me
powering
know,
their power station by gas, and this surely
yeah.
is Christmas will have come early for them if they can get the gas out of the ground.
Well, I don't want to sound flippant. I'm not a flippant sort of guy, but it's a no-brainer. So the company Crogga, through its shareholders and investors, will pay to drill the well, and we'll find out one way or the other if the Isle of Man owns a valuable gas field. And people will say, well, come on, Richard, tell us, you must know the answer. I don't know the answer. Nobody knows until you drill a well. But my guess, based on what I do know about it, is it's a sort of a 50-50 chance. But I mean, that's an extremely good chance to come up with an asset as valuable as this one.
And what risk is there to the Manx taxpayer from this project? You're saying that, I mean, I would imagine, and most people would, that drilling a well is not a cheap operation to do. There'd be quite some engineering involved. What risk is there to the Manx taxpayer? You say it's 50-50. Many
None.
people in business would say, well, that's a good risk to take because there's a
Yeah.
a very good chance that you're going to get the target. What risk is there to the taxpayer? Are they going to be funding the exploration, or will that be privately met?
So we need to raise £32 million that we refer to as dependence well. There is no contribution from the state sector. It's entirely private enterprise money. We think that there's a lot of interest from residents of the Isle of Man. When we began preparations to drill in 23, and we had to stop them because there were no drilling regs, within an incredibly short period of time, we had 96 residents investing in the project. And we make it 100% clear to them, they can lose everything. But if it's a success, it's really valuable. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the Crogga board feel that when we are able to raise money, the regs are in place and we drill this well, there will be several thousand Manx residents that want to contribute. It's a very popular project.
When would you like to realistically see the time of getting a drill into the ground?
A year from now.
So the Isle of Man government need to get on with getting these
Get
regulations.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Now, fascinating stuff, because this morning you released the information that you'd been granted, I don't know what the technical term is, but the UK regulator has given you the necessary credentials to explore a well just off the coast of Blackpool. Now, interestingly,
That's
it's
right.
called Ronalds
Yep.
Way, which, of
Yes,
course,
yes,
a lot of
very
people
confusing.
will assume that Ronalds Way is in Manx waters. Tell us all about this exciting development.
Yes, we're very pleased with it. So, okay, well, firstly, I think Crogga would like to see if it could become a business with 3 or 4 individual assets. It's never wise for any business to be reliant on one asset. And our area of interest is the East Irish Sea, which is the stretch of water that the ferries ply on a daily basis. And we'd like to build a gas production business, first and foremost. So we may end up, we've now got 2 assets, and we might go for 3 or 4, something like that. And we're after becoming an important producer of natural gas in this area. The Ronalds Way gas field is very similar to the Crogga gas field. This one was discovered by BG, British Gas, rather than BP, British Petroleum, years ago, and has never really been followed up. But we look at it, I know quite a lot about the technical side of it all, and just as we do in the Isle of Man, we believe we can make this a commercial gas field. It has the benefit that it's very close to the production facilities in Barrow-in-Furness, so it will be a short time to market between drilling a appraisal well to confirm it's commercial and taking that gas to market.
This development with the UK, comparing it to the timescales you're trying to get up and running with the Isle of Man authorities, how long has it taken for you to do this
3 months.
process with the
Only
UK
three
compared to
months.
the Isle of Man?
Yeah, 3 months versus 6 years.
So you've managed to get all the credentials in place with the United Kingdom in 3 months, and
Yeah,
6 years down the road, you're still trying to deal with the Isle of Man government to get the project off the ground.
that's correct.
And with regard the project of Blackpool, when do you see things starting to happen there?
Well, okay, so what I'd ideally like to do is to fundraise for two wells, the Ronalds Way well and the Independence well, for the cost efficiencies, synergies in the operational program, contract the drilling rig, and drill the Ronalds Way first in UK waters, and then move the rig across to Manx waters and drill Independence. And we're thinking that if we've just drilled in UK waters, a very similar well, that will give a little bit more comfort to the DOI that it's not that difficult to regulate the drilling of a well if you've got the correct procedures in place. And actually, the thing about the field in Manx waters, the one we call the Croggas field, is really rather large. And it would be important to the UK, let alone to the island. And if it is there, and if it is commercial, and if it's going to be developed, the UK gas processing plant needs to know.
But do you think
Yes.
that there is a race, not just in the Isle of Man, but all over the world, to ban hydrocarbons? We're seeing quite a heavy movement. Do you think that the vocal shouting from some of these industries maybe what's holding you up with the Isle of Man government? Do you think that's having any effect on you?
Probably, but natural gas, it's really, really important to say a couple of things, which I will do. So, I am very much an earth scientist by training, and that's my passion. So I'm heavily into this thing, and I do understand the science of climate change. And I understand exactly why such a radical change is required. So I'm on board with all of that. But the world is involved in this so-called energy transition. And it's not like you switch off fossil fuels one day and it's renewable the next day. It's a 50+ year transition. And the cleanest by far of the fossil fuels is gas, natural gas. So actually, gas has been declared as a critical fuel by the EU and many other governments, and they're preserving it and protecting it. And it's very important that we continue to use it. And in the UK in particular, and a couple of numbers that are important to be aware of, the UK already imports 70% of the natural gas it uses, and that number is going to go up to 90% on forecast by 2050. And most of that gas comes in as liquid natural gas by sea from somewhere far away. And the North Sea Transition Authority has got lots of public information out there that shows that if you can use gas in the UK and environs that's locally produced and transported through a pipeline, it only has a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions as does LNG imported from Qatar or Australia or the USA. So in fact, local pipeline gas is by far the least polluting of the fossil fuels. So I'm sleep very well at night, believing that I'm doing a good thing, that natural gas is going to be required for at least the next 40, 50 years.
Richard, thank you very much for joining us, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again on this subject, on both your the project off the coast of Blackpool and also the Crogga field off the coast of Mackle. Thank you very much indeed for your time.